be shortly. All right, welcome everybody. I'm Shani Youngdahl, and this is the first of our 2026 visiting writer events of the spring semester, and I'm super excited to have internationally best-selling author Kathleen Glasgow with us. I'm going to give a proper introduction to Kathleen in a moment, but first I want to give a few important thank yous and reminders. So thank you to the Lindenwood College of Arts and Humanities for supporting this event. Our program director, Joe Bauman, in the MFA in Writing program, all of our faculty for helping to get the word about tonight's reading out, and students who designed our Instagram ad. This program is being recorded to be put in our MFA program closed Canvas shell. So a lot of our students who are working adults across the country, some of them, are just getting off work, so they may be popping in, but they also really appreciate having that there for them later, and they do watch them. So just so we know that they are there too. Please make sure your calendar is marked to attend our upcoming course expo, which is now on Thursday, February 26th at 7 p.m. That's where faculty will tell you about their great upcoming classes, and it's just really great to attend to learn about what's coming up. It will be recorded too, so if you can't make it live, but they are really helpful to students who are trying to figure out what to take, because we do have a lot of great classes, as you know. They also clarify and reinforce our program requirements and give you the opportunity to kind of hear directly from us. So come, bring questions, bring your friends. On March 2nd, we have our grad student reading, readers to be announced soon by Joe, so keep an eye out for that. And then on April 7th, we have Beth Ann Fennelly, the second of our visiting writer series for the spring. And she is a poet and nonfiction author who has a new book of micro memoirs out. So those who are interested in writing flash fiction or nonfiction, that's going to be a great one. On the 22nd of April, we have a faculty reading, which is an exciting new thing that Joe has convinced us to do. And then we will have the graduation reading on May 6th. And if you are graduating, Leslie, I'm looking at you, please email me so that I know to include you on the roster and get you the links to that so that you can share them with your family and friends. Okay, whew. Now for the fun part. We are so excited to have Kathleen Glasgow here. Kathleen is the New York Times and internationally best-selling author of War and Pieces. Oh, see the blur, it's getting me. You'd Be Home Now. How to Make Friends with the Dark. I love this cover. It's really beautiful. And with Liz Lawson, the Agathas, and I actually don't have the second one here to show you, but it's beautiful. It's pink.
It is pink.
I do have some dolls that are named Alice and Iris, which are the protagonists of these. So maybe I'll get those out later if we need to see them. They're right behind me on a shelf. And most recently, The Glass Girl, which I'm probably not supposed to announce favorites, Kathleen. But you know that I love Charlie, who's the protagonist of your first book. But I really love Bella.
Aww.
She got me really good. So I'm gonna spotlight you and let you give us a little reading from The Glass Girl, and then I'll ask you some questions. Does that sound good?
It sounds great to me.
Okay, hold on. It's just gonna take me a second to figure out how to do this because they changed the menu somehow. Spotlight for everybody. There we go. All right, Kathleen, you are up. Thank you.
First, let me say thank you so much for having me. I'm very excited to chat with my good friend Shana. I don't know if everyone knows this, but we were in the same MFA program a long time ago. And I'm so happy to see all the success that she's had with her own writing. and in her life. And I'm very excited to hang out with everyone this evening. So the Glass Girl is about a 15-year-old girl named Bella who is struggling with addiction, anxiety, her parents' bitter divorce, and the death of her beloved grandmother. And the book begins with a poem that has to do with a piece of art that Bella does in her art class. And then the book really begins in Bella's voice, as I'll call it. And there are several different voices that Bella has in this book because for a good portion of the early book, she is drunk. And that voice is necessarily going to be a different one than the one she's using when she's not drinking. The branches dug into her palms. She didn't mind the blood there. She kept going, higher and higher, leaves in her hair, tears in her jeans. She didn't mind the blood there. Some fire in her heart, pushing her higher, away from the shouting, away from the stairs, away from the world. Strong feet, bare on the branches. She didn't mind the blood there. At the top, in the sky, able to breathe, the shouting gone, the stairs gone. Leaned her cheek on the tree, closed her eyes, took it all in, washed it all away, away, away. Such a beautiful world when she dulled it all down, smoothed its jagged edges, filed it all to ash, and watched it drift between her fingers. And then a map, a crack, and she fell. Oh, I'm sorry, a snap, a crack, and she fell, and fell, and fell, and fell. The shards of her nesting in the blood there. Every morning when I wake up, I don't think I'm going to make it. Or maybe I think that I don't want to make it. I'm heavy with what I did the night before, and I'm heavy with everything inside me, and sometimes it is just too goddamn much to carry around. I am the kind of tired that makes your bones feel skeletal and clacky. I am the kind of tired that is cement in your shoes, X-ray vest on your chest, bricks tied to your wrists. But I get up. I drag myself out of bed and plant my cement feet on the floor and start the stupidity of routine because that's what it is to be 15. Your mother will yell at you that if you're going to be late for school. Your dad will yell at you that he'll be late to work if you don't get a move on. Your teacher will embarrass you in class because you weren't paying attention. Anyone and everyone knocks into you in the hallway, sending you tumbling against the wall, and it isn't even on purpose. It's worse. They just don't even see you. You don't exist. You are not the tiniest blip on their radar of humanity. You'll see that person who took your heart and cleaved it in half and stuffed it in their mouth and swallowed, and you want it back, and you think you'll never get it, and who can live like that? Or you'll remember your grandmother is dead, and that's a giant black hole hungry for you too. And who can live like that? Maybe there will be a shooter drill today, and you'll have to huddle under the windows and art. Or maybe it will be real this time, and not a drill. The penguins in Antarctica have plastic in their blood. Fire, floods, it's hot where you live in the desert, and every year it gets hotter. But you have to get up because you're 15, and that's what you do. Put on your baggy jeans, put on baggy t-shirt, baggy hoodie, baggy everything, because you need to leave room for your pain to grow. Protect yourself. You've perfected a mask of powder and black eyeliner and a face for people to look at on the outside, and maybe it's not really who you are on the inside, but who wants to see that? That part is too much and not enough. That part is all hollows and a gray, dying heart. Everyone says it will get better after all this, when you're older, like it's a sentence you have to serve, like it will toughen you up if you can make it, like it will all be worthwhile. And maybe that's true, but it seems a long way away and a long time to carry that weight. And the only reason you can get through the day is because you know what you can do at the end of it to make it worthwhile for a little bit before that comforting wave takes you away and drowns everything else out.
Thank you. I'm going to add myself here so that people can see both of us. But that was so lovely to hear, Kathleen.
Oh, thank you.
And thanks for telling everybody too. I realized after you said, I knew Shayna from that MFA in Minnesota, and I had this whole part of my intro that I that I forgot to include, which was to tell everyone about how that when I met you, you were the program director of the MFA, or the
coordinator. Yeah.
Or the program coordinator of the MFA program. Yeah. And so what Kathleen did was fix everything all the time. And so she's gonna be like, no, she wasn't, because she's humble and really kind and really known for being all these things, right? So yeah, you definitely fixed my schedule more than once. You reassigned my teaching. And then
no one's supposed to know that we can do that.
Sorry, Joe. But then I was like, we don't have a literary magazine. And you were like, well, we had started this one online. And you like gave me your literary magazine. And then it existed at the University of Minnesota for 10 years. Yeah. Which that was pretty cool. And then, of course, when my book was coming out, you were also super supportive and just a real model, I think, of being in community in the world and kind to other people. And I have so appreciated it. And it's also a vibe that you present on, like, it's clear, you know, from even your online presence that you are this person. And it's clear from your books that you're deeply empathetic and kind. And we need that in the world right now. So thank you.
I'm actually super salty. Well, like if we were just hanging out and having coffee, I'd be like, tell me the hot goss, Shayna. And, you know, we would be like super salty.
Look, we share Gen X.
we share the University of Minnesota MFA program and the stories that we could tell. Oh my Lord. Yeah.
Right. So the salty is there, and we love that. And salty maybe also helps you be a good YA writer, because teens are salty sometimes.
They're very salty.
Yeah. You also offered to hold my baby when I was back to do a reading for my first book of poems, and my baby wouldn't stop crying. Do you remember that? Oh. Elodie was like an infant.
Did you let me hold her?
I think I did. Well, my aunt was there and she had her, and you were just back from like maternity leave yourself, because they're like the same age.
You know, I feel like if someone's baby is crying and they're attempting to do something, you should offer to hold their baby so they can do it and not be like, not my monkey, not my circus, like hold that baby. Yeah. I think parents can like uplift each other.
Yeah, it's true. Well, I did have her. There are pictures of me on that panel with her like on my lap.
Yeah.
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 And I remember one of our other panelists, who was a colleague of mine, I showed up with the baby and she said, "You brought one." It was like, well, yeah, she's a baby. What am I going to do? Anyway, normalize bringing your babies to book events.
Yeah, normalize exposing your babies to art from a very young age and showing them that their parents are artists and creatives, and this is the thing that makes them run. Right. And you should be proud of them. That's all I have to say about that.
Right, now I have some real questions. Okay. So if you would start by just telling us a little bit about your journey as a writer. How did you come to writing, and maybe some of your challenges and how you overcame them? And that's like 5 questions at once, but
that's okay. It's you know, I learned to read like very early, and my mother took me to the library as soon as she saw that I was like reading. And my mother was a big reader, and she was always on the couch with a book, and I was always next to her with a book. I loved reading, and it didn't occur to me that I couldn't be the one who was writing things like I read in the books. Like, it just didn't. And there wasn't someone in my life who was like, no, you can't do that. So I read a lot all the time, and I found books like a really safe and nurturing place. And I wrote my own stories and poems, and it just, you know, I wish that I had like more of a struggle story about this, but I don't. No one ever told me, no, that can't be you. And so I just always wrote stories and poems, and I focused on poetry mainly as a teenager and then a young adult and in graduate school. I really loved poetry. And I published work in like literary magazines, and I was perfectly like happy that way because writing is the thing that makes me happy. And it's the place where I am the happiest. And it's the place where I feel the most me in the world. Like that space of writing belongs to me. And my mother was very encouraging. Like in my early 20s, she bought me like my first word processor so that I could write. And when I was having a hard time as a teenager, she would lug her electric typewriter home from her office, and she was like 90 pounds soaking wet, so that I could plug it in and like type all weekend and just type stories because she knew that it made me like feel better because I was just starting to experiencing like severe anxiety. So she was my biggest champion, and she never said no, right? And you take writing workshops and you might have a teacher who's critical or whatever, but usually that helps you. Like it never made me feel like, no, I can't do this. And I like to tell beginning writers that um, if you really love doing it, you're going to do it. No one can stop you. But it isn't about like being on a bestseller list. And it isn't really about even being on a shelf somewhere. It's about you being captivated by a story or a poem that you want to tell and not letting go of it and not letting it let go of you until it's out on the page and done. And that's the thing that's always going to make you feel the best. And so whether I had ever been published or not, it doesn't matter because I would still be writing because like that's my thing. And you have to find your thing in life. But the Girl in Pieces came about in a roundabout way because um, when I was an adolescent and I was struggling with self-harm, I wrote poems and tried to work my way through it. And then I managed myself and my struggles like really well. But when I was in my late 20s and on my way to the University of Minnesota to take a class in the graduate program, a girl sat down next to me on the bus, and she was about my age when I had started harming. And I saw the fresh scars on her arm, and she just reminded me so much of me, like at that age. And I didn't know if I should say anything to her again at all. Like, it's going to be okay. If you can hold on, it's all right. But I didn't, and she got off at the next stop. But I couldn't stop thinking about her. And in our particular MFA program, you had to take a class like out of genre. And there were professors that I had who were like, oh, you should totally take nonfiction and you should write about your scars, right? Like, just toss that off while we're getting coffee. And it's like, I don't want to. I don't want to. I didn't want to talk about that in a poem. It's a subject for me that is much bigger than like one poem or three. But I thought, I feel like I do want to write about that. I don't want to write a memoir. Like, absolutely not. But I could fictionalize this because, I read and I read novels and we studied them in school. I kind of know how you're supposed to write a novel, and it'll be just for me. And so I started it just for me. And I like to say that I started it kind of as a letter to that girl on the bus and to kids like her, that's Charlie. And Charlie's story is not my story, it's fiction because you're a writer and you teach writing. You could start with a little kernel of something from your life, but pretty soon the fictional part is going to take over. And it's like it's naturally going to take over. You don't even have to worry about it. It just is because you already know what happened in your life, and it's not really interesting to have to rehash that on the page. You kind of want to see what happens when it's not what happened to you, right? So that is what happened with Girl in Pieces. It's like, I kept writing this draft and going over and over it. And then our program director, Julie Schumacher, she read some and she encouraged me to do something with it. And the long story short of it is I didn't know how to write a novel then, and I wrote a novel, and there was a process, and it got published as YA. And I've written 5 novels since, and I still don't know how to write a novel because each novel is different and it tells you how to write it. And sometimes it takes a couple of drafts to figure that out. I don't even know if I answered your question anymore. I went I went on like a long
I think you
tangent,
did.
but
No,
that's
I
what
think you
happened.
did.
That's what happened with Girl in Pieces is I just decided I'm a poet who decided to write a novel.
Yeah. Yeah, I feel that. I mean, I had no idea what I was doing when I decided to write a novel, and I was
Right?
like, I'm just gonna do this. I'm gonna
Right?
write until I have 60,000 words, and then I'm gonna figure out
Right?
if I told a story.
Right? That's the
Um,
way. I mean, people are like, "How do I get started?" And I'm like, "Well, do you like reading books?" They're like, "I sure do." And I'm like, "Just write the first line and go from there, and like go till you have like 300 pages, and don't stop, and don't worry about it." That's the hardest part is when you start worrying about it as you're writing it. But no one's stopping you. You don't have to tell anyone. It can be just for you, but nobody knows how to write a book until you start writing that book that you're writing. So yeah, you can.
how did Glass Girl come to
Um,
be?
I kept thinking about because I write a lot about mental health struggles and addiction and grief, like all the things that that actually just makes the life of a person. Like those
Yeah.
things have touched all of us.
Mhm.
And I started because I have been in recovery for almost 20 years at this point. And I was really thinking about like how that started for me, drinking to excess, and why it seems to latch on to some people and not others. Like I know there are factors behind it, like your propensity for addiction and what mental struggles you might be having, or like a genetic factor. But like, why is it, Shayna, that you and I could both be 11 and we have like a sip of something and maybe a few more, and you say, that was fun. It's not for me. And you don't drink again for like 3 years. But like for me, I'm like, this is great. I feel better than I ever have before. I feel so much calmer. I feel like this is where I'm supposed to be. Like, what is that difference? And so I wanted to approach a book like that. And I
Mhm.
wanted to think about a character who starts that way and like the patterns of drinking and how, especially for teens, like people just consider it a rite of passage. Like, of course, you're going to do this and here you go, or you're just blowing off steam now. And the character, I have to wait for a character to come to me. And eventually, after thinking about this, the character of Bella came to me. And I also particularly wanted to, because this is for a young adult audience, I hadn't read a lot of books that dealt with divorce in YA. Like everybody usually seems to be happy and not divorced. And I really wanted to talk about what that was like to have to be two different people for two different parents. One when you're at one person's house and one when you're at the other. And what it's like to basically pack your suitcase and move every 6 days. Because I think that's really hard on kids. I think it's really, really hard. And I wanted to make sure that that subplot was in there. And I also wanted to write a book about um, rehab. And I have never been in rehab for alcohol abuse. So I had to build that from the ground up. But after I wrote Girl in Pieces, I had a lot of messages from readers who wanted to know, they wanted a whole hospital novel. Like, what's it really like being in a psychiatric hospital? Will you write a book where that's the only place that they are? And I realized some of them are really clamoring to know what those atmospheres are like because they're wondering if being in one of those atmospheres might help them. And like reading a book that has that might encourage them to get some help.
Yeah. Thank you. So I think you talked a little bit about how you came to write YA. And you also have talked a little bit about what you think is important or different about YA fiction, but maybe you can add to that second question a little bit more. Like if you have thoughts, because you've talked a little bit about just an awareness of the reader as you're crafting, particularly as you were crafting like these more recent four books.
So when I was writing Girl in Pieces, like I was just writing the book, right? La la la, all by myself. Um, and I never actually thought about where it would go until I had this agent. She was actually my second agent, and she just really loved the book, and she really helped me um, shape it and think about it. And when she submitted it, she said, I'm going to submit it to adult editors and young adult editors because I think that it could go either way because it does deal with some very mature themes. And I said, okay. And I ended up going with a YA editor because she really understood the book. And the adult editors I had talked to wanted to shape the book into something that was more like a sexual thriller, which, if you've read the book, that is not in any way, shape, or form what Charlie's story should be like at all. And I think that what they were thinking about was that book like Sharp Objects, like because there's harm in that as well. And I ended up going with the YA editor. And I'm really happy writing for YA. And I think that's a good place for me to be. And I think that when, like, when you are writing for an adolescent audience, that age group, I think that it's always important to remember how you felt at that age and not to forget that when every emotion is heightened. Every experience is pretty much the first time that you've done something. Like, always remember that because your voice has to be authentic. Your character's voice has to be authentic in that way if readers are going to respond to it. I think on a deeper level. And I have to work on that really hard because I do write what's termed like contemporary realistic fiction. Like, I can't really take liberties with that. I have to make sure that the reader, as they say, the ones that get it, get it. So I have to make sure that I'm never forgetting what it was like to feel that way as a teenager and like have everything be very open and like raw and emotional.
Yeah. How did earning your MFA benefit your writing in your life? I mean, you've touched on it at a few points, but
Um, the MFA I think an MFA program is great. Is your program fully funded? Okay. I wish that all programs were fully funded. I think what the MFA is most beneficial for is giving you the time and space to feel like a writer and to get a lot of writing done and to meet people who are like-minded and they're solely as into the same things that you are. And they just want you to write your book too, and you just want them to write a book. And you finally have this community of writers that you can see like every day. And it's really important because you probably haven't had that before. Because most people are like, no, you can't write, or okay, you want to be a poet? All right. And because they do.
yeah,
But you get in an MFA program and you're like, I'm a poet. And someone else is like, I'm writing a novel. And you're like, yay. And it's like instant encouragement. And
yeah,
so just the community aspect, I think, was really beneficial for me. And also there were some really great professors that we had there. And it really did benefit my writing because when I came out, I had an entire book of poetry. And because of that particular program, I was allowed to take fiction classes. And so I could learn craft from, people like Julie Schumacher and Charlie Baxter when he would come in and sit in my office and like drink his tea and talk about like craft. So those things all shaped me. They were really, really beneficial to me. And also meeting a lot of writers because, writing programs often have really great literary series, and I met a lot of really interesting writers as they came through the program.
yeah. That part, like what you're doing now for us, right? The
Right.
conversations that you get to have are wonderful. So let's talk a little bit about like your writing schedule. Do you have a writing schedule? What does your writing practice look like? Do you remember that um was it wasn't Mariah Damon, it was Mariah Fitzgerald who used to always say, think of your ninth book. And it made me crazy at the time.
I
But
kind of understand it now.
I get it now
I
because
really do.
it's about like making a life where you can keep writing, like no
Yeah.
matter what, right?
Yeah.
That's what it's about. It's just you're always writing.
Right.
But
You
yeah,
have this job and sometimes you have like kids in this life. You have to carve out that space. Like no one can carve out that space for you. Like you have to sit down. Were you in the program when Amy Shern was in the program?
Mhm. Yeah.
Okay, so one thing that I remember that Amy talked about in an essay, I think after her third book came out, that I hadn't really articulated to myself before, was that whatever you're working on in that moment is going to reflect the situation of your life at that moment. So she said her first book, How Far is the Ocean from Here, which is a beautiful book, and I love it, and I think about it like all the time,
Mhm.
is long and dreamy and has these long chapters and long like paragraphs because she was out of the program. She had a job in New York. She was getting up early in the morning to write before she went to her job, and nobody knew, and she could just do whatever she wanted, right? And then her second book comes out, and she's had a baby. And the chapters are short, intense, because she didn't have a lot of time, because now she has a baby and she can only write in like 10 to 15-minute bursts because she's staying home from her job, but she's, we need to write, so we're going to write. So that like dictated the structure of that book. And I had never really thought about those things. And then she talked about like her subsequent books. And I think that's really true. Um, like when my kids were smaller, and I was working my day job and they would come home from school. And sometimes I would have to write in bed sitting between them on my laptop because that's when I had time to write after putting them to bed. But they didn't want to be by themselves. They wanted me with them. So that's where I wrote. And that's how a lot of How to Make Friends with the Dark was written. And you have to squeeze in time. And right now, because I share custody of them, I try to do all my writing in that time when they're at their dad's, where I have like these long days because I want to be present for them when they're here because they're both teens now and I want to make sure that I am going to those ballet events and like talking to them about things that they do every day and helping someone, fill out applications for college. And I want to be very present for them in that time that they're with me and be able to say things like, hey, do you guys want to go to IHOP and just read our phones and not talk or anything? And not have to say, I can't talk right now, I have to go write. So and so, you have sometimes your schedule dictates you, and then you have to learn to dictate your schedule and be like, this is when I will do this and this. And as I've gotten older, I don't really like to write um, at night anymore. I just want to read books or watch TV. I don't want to sit there in my fingerless gloves anymore in a really cold room and like smoking my cigarettes and writing my poems. I'm like, it's just not me anymore. I want to be in my pajamas in the morning when I wake up with my cup of coffee and like feed my animals and then go straight to sitting down in that space. And then not do it the next 6 days when my kids are with me because then I'm driving people and we're all over and you set the pace.
Yeah, I love that. And I love too how you described it as, it's changing over the course of your life, right?
Yeah,
But the constant is you make the time, right?
right.
You keep doing it.
Right. And it's okay if you don't write some days. It's really all right because if you're a writer, you're always writing in your head anyway, and you're filing things away and it's sitting in your subconscious and it will come out at some point. And sometimes, and I think happens maybe as you get older. Sometimes you're just really tired and you're like, I do want to write, but I can't because I'm just really tired. So you're going to save it up for the next day when you've had more sleep
Yeah.
and you can
Mhm.
do it. I think it's necessary. And also as you get more confident in your writing, you try and stretch your wings. Like Liz and I co-wrote two mysteries together. And that was really awesome because I'd never done that. I like reading them. She loves reading them and she writes them anyway, by herself. And so that was really fun. And the best thing about that was the collaborative effort that it took between us. And so I do tell writers, maybe you should try writing something with someone. It's kind of nice to be in the story with someone else who knows the exact problems that you're going through and like what you need to do, and you can bounce it off them. And they're working with you in the same story, and that is a really great thing to do.
So can you tell a little bit about how the Agatha's project came about? So they're co-written with Liz Lawson, who has two standalone novels or three on her own now.
Uh,
Um,
yeah, three.
yeah, Yeah,
Yeah.
3. And she's terrific. I highly recommend her as well. But I'm just curious, like, how did you work? Did you email things back and forth? Did you have a shared document?
Well, it was we shared the same editor, so I read her debut novel and I blurbed it and I really liked it and we became friends. And then when the
Yeah.
novel came out, the pandemic hit and everything shut down. So her
Yes.
tour was canceled, all of that was canceled, and um her book did not do as well as it should have because who knew what was really going to happen.
Yeah.
And we were chatting that summer and I was not writing the book that I was supposed to be finishing, You'd Be Home Now. And we were just chatting and we were both like, and we were just talking about stuff. We liked mysteries. And she said, "Would you ever write one?" And I was like, "I don't know. I don't know if I know how to write a mystery because you really have to like know your stuff and I don't usually make an outline, but you have to make outlines for mysteries before you start. Like you have to know things like red herrings and beats and what's going to happen here and there." And Liz said, "Well, I do. What if we just did something for us and we just like wrote one for the fun of it and we won't even tell like our agents or our editor?" And I said, "Okay." So we came up with this whole plan and spreadsheet in dual POV, and she would be Alice and I would be Iris, and we came up with the plot, and we had a whole spreadsheet of what would happen in each chapter, and the red herrings, and the true clues, and the whole thing, because she knew the whole structure. And she lives in a different state, and so she would email an Alice chapter to me in the morning, and then text me to get up and go write my corresponding Irish chapter. And I would send it to her. And we agreed, like, let's just make this like go quickly. Like each chapter can only be less than 10 pages. You have to turn it into each other that day. And then when we need like little breaks in between with newspaper articles or like Facebook posts in the book, we'll take turns with those. And we just had fun.
That's
And
awesome.
there were parts of it that we had a lot of fun researching it, like the main premise of what happens to Brooke Donovan, like when she's kicked off the cliff, actually came from an episode of Forensic Files that I watched because I do like um, watching and reading about true crime, not the grisly part, but the aspects of how long people can keep secrets and like the procedural part of figuring out how something was done. So we just had like fun and it was very freeing. And then at some point I said, "Liz, I have to go back to writing my other book now. That was a lot of fun." And she said, "Actually, I lied and I told my agent, and my agent, like, she really loves it and she thinks that we should give it to our editor." And I was like, "Oh my God, what? Who's gonna buy a mystery from us, right? We both write like sad contemporary realistic
Right.
fiction. Who's gonna buy this kind of wacky mystery that's actually really just a friendship story?" Um,
Hmm.
who's going to buy that from us? But our agent really loved it, and she thought it would be a good thing for us, like career wise, to like just sort of spread our wings and do that. And I learned a lot about pacing and outlines and structuring. I don't know if you outline your novels beforehand or not, from Liz, and we just had a great time creating these characters and thinking about it was just fun to be like, what should we name the donut
Yeah.
shop?
Yeah.
Like, what
Yeah.
nickname should we give this other important character? Oh, Idaho, after potatoes. Why not? We just had it's fun to do that with someone else.
Yeah. Oh, totally.
Yeah.
I had so because the last book catalog is, set in a fictional version of
Yeah.
my hometown. Like my best friend who's a fire survivor and, was very involved. Like she read drafts of it and she would be the person who I would go back and forth on like funny names for the town because there's damn puns. And it was like having
Right?
a little creative partner, right? It was so
Yeah.
nice. Um, and your critique groups can do stuff like that too, but like that sounds really fun. Um,
It really was. We had a great time.
okay, so people make friends, write books with them.
Yes.
Um, let's see where. Oh, best writing advice you've ever given. These are our standard questions now. What was the best writing advice you've ever been given?
If you just write a little bit every day in a year, you'll have 300 pages. And that's a book. that you can work with. And all I'm asking is for like a couple of sentences every day, maybe a paragraph. Like that's it. Like you have the time. The second best writing advice that someone ever gave me, now that like I'm in this, and this is where I draw my income from. Dennis Johnson, when he visited the University of Minnesota program, he said that he knows it's time to start writing another book when his wife comes over and turns off the TV and turns around and says, "We have bills to pay."
That's great. And then what's the worst writing advice?
I think, I don't know what, I don't even know if I have that. So at one point I took this workshop with Girl in Pieces when it was called the Tender Kit, and it was with Antonia Nelson, who's a superb writer. I was like shocked I was in that workshop with her. It was at a conference. And I don't, it seems like it's bad advice. And halfway through doing what she said, I thought that maybe it was, but then in the end I realized it was actually pretty good. She told me to rewrite um the manuscript from first person to third. Because she said you have to have a really, really good reason to write a book in first person. You got to have a really strong voice for that. And I was like, okay. Because, I'm talking to Antonia Nelson. And I was like, all right. So I did. It took a long time. But in the end, it was not right for that particular book. But in the end, it actually helped me because in the third person, it helped me like really zero in on things like setting and atmosphere and like dialogue as a separate entity from the first person perspective. And so those things remained, like those parts like really helped me. And her big advice for writing a novel, which I think is good advice, is that first you just write your draft, and then the second draft you go back and just think about like dialogue. And now you're going to like sharpen everyone's dialogue. And you're not going to work on anything else. It's only dialogue. Go through the whole draft. And the third one is like character. Now that you've done the dialogue, did you realize which characters they're not fully crystallized, and maybe they shouldn't even be in this book. So you have to go back and you're only doing characters and who lives, who dies, who are you cutting? Like what's going on? Are they functioning? And then after that, your draft is like just setting. You're not doing anything. It's only setting like what color is that wallpaper? Like what does the sunset look like through the rear view mirror? Do you know what I mean? Like that's it, because you need to sharpen that. And then the next one and the last one is actually just plot. So everything is tight as it should be. Did you do what you wanted to do? And I think that for some people, that is a really good approach to revision. Because the one thing people will ask, and I think it's hard to learn, is like how to revise. Like what does that even mean? What does that mean? And I think that that's the same thing for poetry, nonfiction, and fiction. Is like maybe you just think about it in those stages, right? One thing at a time, rather than looking at the whole thing and trying to do all of that at once, which can be sometimes overwhelming.
Yeah, I love that. I have tried something similar.
Right.
And yeah, it's helpful because you just need a way to narrow, right? But what works best for me now is like checklists. And then I can have like really easy things like change the dad's name or whatever. And I can do that at 7 a.m, like before my first sip of coffee even, and then I've checked something off the list. But then I also have big things like, figure out what the heck is going on in chapter 4.
Right. And I think, and some people use like Scrivener where you can just do one thing and, and I work on like Word and that's it. And I know that, you've gotten your edit letters. Sometimes they're really like sad from your editor and you're like, I cannot even, and you spend like, the 3-day grieving process where you're like, oh no. But I actually find them it's really sad.
It is. It's a total process. Yeah.
But then like after that, I find them really helpful because I have a boundary. And I'm like, I actually think that that's right because it is outside eyes and they're not the person who's so close to the story like you are. They're only there to sharpen it and make it better. And then I'm like, I love this letter because It's a checklist. Here I go. These are the things that I'm going to fix. And some of them you'll be like, no, and you need to have a reason for that. But mostly they're spot on. And I'm like, I can zing this out. Let's do it. Let's do it. And so you know, as a writer too, you totally have to be open to other people's critical suggestions. And you do have to have that part of you that doesn't take it personally. You don't have to listen to people who are going to make that like Goodreads review and you don't respond to it. But there are other people in the writing world, you know, like an editor and a professor. Like we're just trying to make it really shine because it's so promising and it's so good. And we want your work to be the best that it can be. And we want you to look at these things like, here's what we see on the outside picking up this book, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
What's next, or what are you working on now? Can you tell us anything?
I am working on a book. My next book is supposed to come out in 2027, though it's a little late. I'm often a little late. And my father passed away recently, so I'm going to be like a little later. And also that's the thing to remember is that life happens.
Yeah.
And you have to take the time to let life happen before you can sometimes get back to work. The next book is about an abused girl who runs away and is taken in by a family of thieves. And then the book after that is a companion novel to Girl in Pieces.
Oh.
It is not a sequel. It is told from the perspective of Louisa, which actually makes it a historical novel because she was a bit older than Charlie when they meet at the center. And so I'm not interested in writing a sequel to Girl in Pieces. I think that Charlie's story, it ended there and I'm happy with it. But I did say that I was open to like writing another book in that world that could be read by itself.
Yeah.
And you didn't have to read Girl in Pieces. And I chose Louisa because I have a lot of notes on Louisa that I've always had. Like she has a whole backstory in my head that's not on the page. And she's very interesting to me.
That's exciting. And it's a historical novel because it'll be like what, the 90s, right?
It would have to be the 90s, yeah.
Yeah. And I know that I point that out because I'm always telling my students and they're like, but that's not. And I'm like, but they're teenagers. And when when the 90s went to teenagers, right? You
have to think about think about those things. Because like if you think about Girl in Pieces and it came out like almost 10 years ago, and we mentioned like Twitter and Facebook, you can kind of think when it takes place, right? But Louisa at that time was also like, I think she's in like her mid to late 20s. And so if I write about her from the ages of 13 to 18, which is what the book will be, I have to go back a little bit and I have to make a choice and pick where she was and what was happening. And it has to necessarily happen. These are things you think about when you're writing, like maybe the amount of research that you'll have to do. It has to take place in like St. Paul and Minneapolis because she would have been there. Like she would have grown up there, right? Like Charlie, but they don't meet until they're at like the Creeley Center. So I have to really think about that. And that, like when you're writing YA too, if you have older characters in YA and they're like the parents, if you're building their characters, when were they born? How old are they? What music would they have listened to when they were teenagers? And that's something that happened like with Bella's dad in The Glass Girl. And the songs that he would sing her, they would have been something from when he was a teenager. So I had to be like, how old is he? What would he have been listening to based on that? And like what song would still go through his head? And then you'd be home now with Emmy's dad when she has to try to figure out the combination to his safe. And she has to really think about it. And the song that he always sang to her at night was a song that he had loved as a kid, which is like the Jenny song, which has the phone number in it, right? And that's the combination to this 867, and so you have to think like that's the combination to the safe. And I had to really think about like, well, what do you like, who is he, what would he have listened to that would also make it easy for him to remember that combination, and that a daughter could ostensibly think, oh, it's that song.
Yeah. So we should give the students an opportunity to ask questions if they have any. You guys can pop them in the chat or raise your hand. Let's see. Yes, Leslie, go ahead. Hold on.
Hi there. That was me. I was muted.
Hi, Leslie.
Hi, thanks so much for sharing. So interesting. I'm wondering, like, how do you pick, or at which point do you decide on the point of view that you're gonna be using? Like, I mean, have you written anything in more than one? Or well, I guess besides the one that you did with your friend, obviously, but
No, I haven't. Although, well, How to Make Friends with the Dark is in first and second person. And that's a book about a girl whose mother dies suddenly and she's left alone, like literally alone at 16. And I was trying to think about those like huge swaths of grief that overtake you in that moment. And I thought, well, how can I convey this? And so some of the book is in second person when she's really talking about what that feels like, because I feel like she would dissociate in some way when she was really dealing with that. And I'm like, I'm just going to write this in second person. And I did. So sometimes I do. And even though, in the Glass Girl like perspective, I had to really think about that because she is inebriated for a large portion of the first half of the book. And I need to show that to a reader. So I need to differentiate between the voice when she's mostly sober and the voice when she's actually really, really drunk, especially in one section where she's about to black out. And I like for that perspective, it is first person, but I had to think about how she's going to sound so that the reader can see that she's like disintegrating and she's hitting this really dangerous point, and also how to structure that on the page. And so most of that section devolves into like very short single lines. So I haven't, the companion novel to Girl in Pieces is going to be in the third person. And part of that is because when Louisa shows up in Girl in Pieces, she is an active character on the page, but the way that Charlie mainly gets to know who she is and to discover things about herself in the process is by reading Louisa's composition notebooks where she wrote about her life. And so that I feel like that book has to be in the third person with excerpts from her composition books in the first person. But I think that the bulk of it is in the third person. And that, I don't know how I choose, but that felt natural. It felt natural to me to do that for that character. Like in the few, like I've written, I think like 50 pages of that so far, and that feels like the natural fit to me because then the other things can come out in the first person in the excerpts from the notebooks. I think it's what feels natural for you as you're thinking about that character and the story that you want to tell. But what do I know? I really don't know how to write a book. I learn things all the time.
Well, I love too how you said that, you wrote Girl in Pieces in first person and then third person, right? And then first person again.
Yeah.
Because
it didn't feel right in third person. Like there
Yeah.
wasn't this sense of urgency that I really wanted to have. And I felt like I couldn't, I don't know. I just felt like that book, I just wanted to say what I had to say, and like no one was watching, and I'm not on social media and I'm not talking about it, and no one knows. And I had felt like I had to have a really perfect blend for me as the person writing it of poetry and prose. And the beginning is very much like prose poems. And I loved that. And then the book has to open up because she's out in the world now. and she's had a little bit of experience, and she's in a whole different location and different things are happening. And so the paragraphs in her perspective become long and stretchy, right? And then when bad things happen and she goes back, everything gets very compressed again. And I'm a very like intuitive and emotive writer, and I do let like the characters just take me where they want to go, and that comes out in the perspective and the structure on the page. I haven't answered your question.
Sorry, somebody else. Does somebody else have a question? Was there one in the chat, I think? Oh, how you get to know your characters.
You know, I let my characters be who they want to be. In the beginning, like I think that your first draft of a book needs to be really, that's a great question. It needs to me, as the person writing it, I like to just write a really wild and messy first draft. And I know now with a lot of experience that, you know, the next draft, some things are going to go, but I need to get them out of my system. And so I let characters do what they need to do. And then later, I'm going to try to control them because I need them to do some things that I need them to do for the plot. So I let them happen. Although I know writers who will come up with really extensive character biographies before they even start writing the book. Like they need to do like astrological charts. They need to know things that are not even going to appear in the book. And I think that's a really good thing. I think in some ways it just comes down to like what kind of writer are you? And what do you want to do with your characters? I like thinking about what music my characters might listen to. I really like thinking about what they wear, although some people, especially for YA, are like, I don't want to hear what that person is wearing. But I think that if you can describe it in the right subtle way, that's a real key to a reader as to what kind of person this is or how they might be feeling in that moment is like, what are they wearing?
I have one more question, so this will be our last one. Best advice for people getting ready to graduate for a smooth transition back into the real non-MFA program world.
The first thing you need to know is like, I am like really amazingly proud of you. You made it through the program, and I believe that at this point you have a book under your belt in some genre. So you did it. You did it, and you can continue to keep doing it. And my best advice for you is to not stop writing. You just did it. You just spent like the last couple of years writing nonstop and thinking about writing, and you need to make sure that your non-MFA life is still writing and writing and thinking about writing and reading books, and keep those friends that encourage you, that are just as into making a life as a writer as you are, and just get the job that helps you write. Like you need to eat. So make sure that you're working somewhere where you're like, you know what? I have time to write, or I can make time to write. And no one's going to write that thing but you. And if you want to go farther and get it published, start working on that and like sending it out and doing the best you can. You just never know like when the good stuff is going to happen.
Yeah. I love that. That's a wonderful moment to end on. I think.
This is like finding community, because it's like built in your program, and you have to make sure that you're sustaining that outside the program. And I still talk to so many people like Shayna from, it's like 20 years ago, and I'm still chatting with them, and, and like keeping up with them on social media and emailing. I mean, they're my friends. They're my friends. And someone I graduated the MF. Yeah, you know what I mean? It's like, it's the same thing. Those are your people. You found them. Don't let them go.
And I think they don't go away. I mean, I had a call with Ethan Miller like this week. We haven't talked in 18 years, but he like wrote something that's maybe YA, and I was like, I'll talk to you about that, of course.
Good. Like that's awesome. I mean, keep up with people and ask how they're doing. Like you met them. You have a community now. Like get together if you can, if they're in your town once a week, like a couple of you, and like have coffee, sit down and write if you want to, but keep it going. Be accountable to each other and keep it going.
Thank you, Kathleen.
Oh, I had a lovely time chatting with you.
This was really good. And thank you everybody else for coming. Really appreciate you all being here, and we'll see you at our next event soon.
Thank you so much for having me, and I can't wait to read everyone's book. So, keep me in the loop about what's going on.
Will do. Thanks so much, Kathleen.
All right. Bye.
Bye.